Welcome back to Tech with Benefits. Daniel here. Today, if you're a Note 20 Ultra owner, you're in luck because this video, we take a look at how the Note 20 Ultra holds up in 2023 and compares to the brand new Galaxy S23 Ultra. Let's go. Galaxy Note 20 Ultra came out in 2020 towards the back end of the year amongst a flurry of other Samsung devices. And at the time, it was a big deal. Samsung refined the Note 10 Plus's design, was able to put some impressive camera hardware, whilst keeping the phone in this slim and light package. Overseas variants, in particular the US, you managed to get your hands on the brand new Snapdragon processor. In Australia, where I was, that wasn't the case. We unfortunately were stuck with the Exynos. And the Exynos of 2020 was terrible. It just did not work as well as what the Qualcomm counterpart device did. So we were stuck with that. And whilst from a hardware level, the device hit a lot of positivity, its design was sleek, the cameras were great, it was just let down by its performance. So today, we're going to take a look at how the Note 20 Ultra stacks up, and if you're thinking about upgrading, where your upgrades will be with the Galaxy S23 Ultra. So we're going to kick that off with first taking a look at the hardware. And by hardware, I mean external hardware. We've got the design. And the design of the Note 20 Ultra was, at its time, incredible. It was slim, it was light, it was thin. It was an incredible form factor to hold. It had a really more dramatically curved display than what we now know Samsung to be making. And they also put at the back this giant camera island. It kind of followed the trend that the S20 Ultra brought in that same year, but not quite as garish. They removed that Space Zoom times 100 logo from the back and just kept it this island that was really neat and consistent with the shape and the design of the phone. Something else the Note 20 Ultra had going for it was its front display was big, 6.9 inches, with a very tiny Infinity O punch hole cutout for the camera at the front. So from a design standpoint, the Note 20 Ultra absolutely holds its own in 2023, particularly when you consider that we haven't really seen Samsung take a drastic departure from that when it comes to its Ultra flagships. Considering the Note 20 Ultra was the last Note device, its legacy continues with the S23 Ultra. Because when we look at the design of the new generation of Note, the S23 Ultra, you'll notice a lot of design cues have been taken from the Note 20 Ultra. You got the boxier corners, the more industrial design, definitely takes cues from the Note heritage that Samsung made in years gone by. But what you've got that's, I guess, upgraded over the Note 20 Ultra is you have the new Victus 2 glass, front and back. You've got the Armor aluminium frame, which is lighter but also more durable. But what they've also done is made the phone thicker. So obviously being a Note device, it needs to accommodate the S Pen. So with the Note 20 Ultra, Samsung decided to just make the phone thinner, shave some milliamp hours off the battery. Whereas the S23 Ultra, Samsung didn't want to make that sacrifice. So they made the phone thicker overall. But where they've kind of hidden that well is whilst there is still that slight curve on the front display, Samsung have flattened out the side edges. So it actually feels more ergonomic in the hand to grip and to hold, and it's not as slippery. Something else that I've found since revisiting the Note 20 Ultra and doing this comparison is that curved display, my goodness, when you're not used to it, the accidental touches are staggering. I don't have that problem on the S23 Ultra because it gives me more surface area to hold on the side. My hands aren't creeping in to the edge of the phone. It's also a smaller display, 6.8 versus 6.9, but you honestly won't notice that. And also what you won't notice is the slightly bigger punch hole camera. And when we talk about cameras, that'll make sense as to why. The S23 Ultra also decided to change its camera layout. And I kind of actually miss the one surface area for all of the camera lenses to be housed under. Because when I go and clean the Note 20 Ultra's lens, it's literally just cleaning one part of it and that's it. The S23 Ultra, I have to clean each individual camera and it can get a little bit tiresome. However, it does look better. And because I'm not looking at the back of my phone and other people are, they know I've got the latest. From a design standpoint, it's all about your preference. If you really like a thinner, lighter phone and you've got your Note 20 Ultra and you just want to keep it for its aesthetics, then stick with it. However, the S23 Ultra does have improved durability with its materials. It also has a much more ergonomic grip and less accidental touches on the sides. That's something you can consider if you're looking to upgrade to the newer phone, just purely on design. Okay, now diving inside the phone into the internals. Now, I'm not a channel that does teardowns. For that, go see Jerry Rig Everything. For me, I know how to talk about the internals and why internals matter. So numbers, specs, benchmarks, you're not going to see a benchmark from me. I'm not cutting to a benchmark right now. Ultimately, yes, benchmarks can tell a particular story, but that's not why you should buy the phone for performance. Day-to-day performance is what matters. So the Note 20 Ultra in Australia, where I come from, we had the very unfortunate news that we were receiving the Exynos 990 variant. Overseas, in the US, they were lucky. They got the Snapdragon 865 Plus, the upgraded 865, which was already streets ahead of the Exynos 990. For us in Australia, getting that processor was a huge disappointment. We dealt with it. I dealt with it. I used it. I very much didn't notice a day-to-day performance difference because, well, I didn't know what to compare it to. Where I did absolutely feel it though with that processor was the battery. Because the Note 20 Ultra was trying to make design first, it shaved a whole bunch of, I guess, thickness off the phone and packed it in with a 4,500 milliamp hour battery. And with a processor like the Exynos 990 that's not power efficient and draws a lot of power from the battery, it wasn't good. Performance-wise, I didn't have any issues, and I still don't. Like, even flying through the phone now, performance and the internals work fine. But the battery is where it really let me down. On the other side of that, though, it still retained some of Samsung's best internal hardware. Micro SD expansion was still a big, and is still in the Note 20 Ultra. So that's definitely a plus for it. It had UFS 3.0 storage, so internal storage was fast. It was let down by the charging. It was only 25 watt. It had the ultrasonic fingerprint scanner under the display, the first generation version still. And the S Pen was the first Samsung S Pen to support 9 milliseconds of latency with the pen to the display for writing. So that was something quite incredible. It didn't really add much more to the pen's gesture set. So it was still had the Bluetooth Low Energy and all the air actions and everything like that was on the Note 20 Ultra. But the big advancement there from then was the 9 milliseconds of latency. But if we fast forward to now with the S23 Ultra, the internals of this phone, it's not even a comparison. Samsung shifted their focus with the S22 Ultra in Australia and went with Snapdragon. So last year we had the Snapdragon 8 Gen 1, but we know there was still problems with that because of where that processor was made. Luckily, Qualcomm pivoted to make their new processors on TSMC's fabrication line. Beneficiary? Us. Because the Snapdragon 8 Gen 2 for Galaxy, which is just an overclocked version of the Snapdragon 8 Gen 2, fully aware, means that we're getting all of those performance gains and the efficiency that this processor provides is second to none. I'm using the S23 Ultra on light performance mode, and I'm still far outperforming what the Note 20 Ultra's capabilities are. And I'm not just talking benchmarks, like I said before. I'm talking things like editing and exporting a photo from Lightroom. It is so much quicker and so much more efficient to do creativity and productivity on the S23 Ultra, thanks to the Snapdragon 8 Gen 2 for Galaxy. And because of the efficiency of this processor, its battery with 5,000 milliamp hours is also able to last a lot longer. Samsung made the phone thicker to accommodate the bigger battery and still be able to house the internal S Pen. And this battery can charge at 45 watt super fast charging. Now, I'm well aware that other brands do faster charging, but I'm not talking about other brands right now. I'm simply comparing Note 20 Ultra to S23 Ultra. The way the Note 20 Ultra had things like micro SD card expansion, the S23 Ultra does not. What the S23 Ultra does have though is a faster internal storage, UFS 4.0. So that is definitely a nice thing to have and makes everything feel snappier, things open quicker, files copy and transfer faster between the phone. It's a nice inclusion. It also makes use of a better RAM standard, DDR5 RAM 5X, I believe it is, versus what was on the Note 20 Ultra. And look, with the base model S23 Ultra, you only get 8 gig of RAM, but you can scale that up and get 12 with the 512 gig and the 1 terabyte variants. Other things to note is you do have the second generation under display fingerprint scanner. It is noticeable how much faster and how much less accurate you need to be to make it work. You can see side by side here how much drastically improved it is versus the Note 20 Ultra. Other things as well is the thermals and the cooling system on the S23 Ultra is larger. So it is going to allow the phone to sustain its performance longer because it keeps it cool. And as I talked about with the S Pen on the Note 20 Ultra, you have 2.8 milliseconds of latency. So it improves it from 9 to 2.8. And in my opinion, it's super silly how fast it actually is. And I think if I slow this video down here, you'll see the difference between the two. And this 2.8 milliseconds is Samsung apps. So Samsung has obviously optimized its own apps with an algorithm plus the refresh rate of the display to be able to make that work. Okay, hardware covered. Let's, I guess, turn the phone on and take a look at what these phones' software are doing. With the Note 20 Ultra, we have One UI 5.1 currently. And sad to say, it is the last version of One UI you will see on the Note 20 Ultra. And if you're happy with that, if you like where One UI 5.1 is at, then you shouldn't really be concerned because it is still packed full of features. And all of the stuff that the S23 Ultra that you like about One UI 5.1 is mostly here with Note 20 Ultra. So I'm not going to go through everything. What I will go through is what is different. Things that didn't get upgraded when One UI 5.1 or 4.0 and everything before it came with it. On the S23 Ultra and Samsung phones, I think from the last couple of years, the Google Discover feed is what happens when you swipe to the right from the home screen. You have your Google News that you can sort of cycle through. It's personalized. The Note 20 Ultra doesn't have that. It's got Samsung Free. It's like Samsung's version of that, but not as good. So, yeah. Usually you just turn that off. So that's a thing. It also is preloaded with Samsung Messages. It predates Samsung's partnership with Google, where Google Messages got preloaded. The bigger one, though, is the display. The display software features. The Note 20 Ultra has an adaptive 120Hz panel. However, there was some uproar about this when it came out. It can only do it at Full HD+. If you try to change your display resolution to Wide Quad HD+, it'll tell you it's dropping it down to 60Hz because it cannot support it at both. Huge disappointment. People did not know what to make of it. For the most part, again, you won't notice it, but just the fact that you can't do it, ugh. So just be wary of that. That's a software difference for sure. The S23 Ultra has One UI 5.1, but with Samsung's software support lifecycle, this will likely get upgraded to One UI 9 or One UI 9 point something. So you've got a lot of longevity ahead of you with this phone and its software. And like I said, with the Note 20 Ultra, this is loaded with Google Messages. This is loaded with the Google Discover page. You've got the Microsoft partnership littered throughout the software, which was prevalent on the Note 20 Ultra too. It just extends into the S23 Ultra. Back to the display, there's a display software setting in here that you won't even notice exists called Adaptive Vision Booster. What this does is Samsung has software built in that will recognize, I guess, your lighting environment. So if it's in a really bright environment, whilst the brightness will go all the way up, Samsung has different stages that will adapt the color accuracy as you go through the brightness stages as well. The Note 20 Ultra doesn't have that. It will send the brightness maximum. It just won't adapt the color to be reproduced accurately as the brightness goes up. That being said too, the brightness on the S23 Ultra is staggeringly good. So I think that's a worthy upgrade. And of course, the cameras. This is usually, I guess, where everyone wants to know, what's the cameras like? Yeah, sure, I get it, because smartphone cameras are the best camera to have on you. It fits easily in your pocket, you don't need to carry around multiple lenses, they're all there. So I completely understand where this comes from. If we stopped making smartphones 3 years ago when the Note 20 Ultra came out, you'd be satisfied because everyone did camera reviews back then and called them great cameras. But we keep advancing, we keep moving. So let's break it down. Hardware-wise, the Note 20 Ultra has 3 cameras on the back. The 12 megapixel ultra wide, which doesn't have dual pixel autofocus. The main 108 megapixel sensor in the middle, the wide angle, which bins down to 12 megapixel shots with, again, no sort of autofocus really to speak of. It's got a little bit, but not a lot. And then you've got what Samsung put in here is a 5 times folded periscope lens. And this was also 12 megapixels. The apertures of these were f2.2, f1.8, and f3.0. So they kind of suited different lighting environments. You also had the laser autofocus module on the back of the Note 20 Ultra, which was put in to correct the terrible focus that the S20 Ultra was plagued by at the start of that same year. Turning it around to the selfie camera, you had a 10 megapixel punch hole selfie camera, which was okay. It served the purpose. I'll go through some camera samples in a little bit. Let's look at the S23 Ultra. The S23 Ultra, on paper, is better, just in numbers. You've got the 12 megapixel ultra wide with dual pixel autofocus. Dual pixel autofocus makes a huge difference and is quite common throughout this camera. You have the massive 200 megapixel main camera, which for the first time on a Samsung phone has quad pixel autofocus, which is the next step above dual pixel autofocus. And really, whilst the sensor size remains the same, that is ultimately what makes the most difference when it comes to this camera. It's not the megapixels. It's not the fact that it's an upgraded sensor, more sensitivity to light, all that sort of stuff. It's the fact that it's got quad pixel autofocus. That is what will enable the speed of focusing in all lighting conditions to occur and just gives you better detail. You have the 3 times telephoto at f2.4 aperture, and you have the 10 times f4.9 aperture 10 megapixel periscope camera. The flexibility you get from this camera system is incredible. It's powerful to know that this is in your pocket. And that's all paired with the laser autofocus module that's on the back. Similar or same as what the Note 20 Ultra had. And again, turning around the front, Samsung decided to put a 12 megapixel selfie camera with dual pixel autofocus on the front of this camera. If we're going to compare the main camera, I said it before, the quad pixel autofocus makes the difference. The way this effectively works is that behind each pixel of the sensor, you have a photodiode normally. Quad pixel has 4 to actually act as almost like the eye for that particular pixel. And having 4 versus having just 1 enables for much faster capturing and focusing speed. But also what sets this sensor apart is that in the Note 20 Ultra, about 3% of the 108 megapixels were used for focusing. With the quad pixel autofocus on the 200 megapixel camera, every single pixel is dedicated for autofocusing. So the speed of focus and the speed of being able to capture just improves. And you can see that here when I'm taking photos of my daughter. So yeah, the Note 20 Ultra with the laser autofocus did a much better job than what the S20 Ultra did. The motion blur, that kind of wasn't as prevalent, but you can see how much sharper the S23 Ultra is with that quad pixel autofocus in play. The other thing that this camera does really well is zoom. The S23 Ultra can go way further, and with the better image processing, cleans up the images to be way sharper. You can see some examples here, like the swan. Like I just couldn't get a good photo with the Note 20 Ultra. This is the best one that I was able to get. And you also can see the Surface Paradise sign that I took a photo of. Again, you just can't compare the two. The S23 Ultra makes it so much better. And just having that ability to go from ultra wide and cycle through the different cameras makes things so much better. Particularly as well with the S23 Ultra, the 2 times zoom magnification is actually cropping in on a higher resolution. So it keeps the photo at and preserves it with more detail compared to what the Note 20 Ultra did. The S23 Ultra also has macro capabilities, and you can learn a bit more about everything the S23 Ultra camera can do in my every camera mode demonstrated video that I'll link up here in the card, and I'll chuck it in the description as well. So just having a look at some of the photos, you can see that whilst there's not much of a difference between daytime shots, what I did notice with the Note 20 Ultra was that it didn't capture sunlight very well. And that's because it had some sort of glass that really threw some I don't know what the terminology is for it. You can see it in the photo here. The S23 Ultra has an anti-reflective coating, which actually bounces the sunlight away and doesn't absorb it into the shot, whereas the Note 20 Ultra doesn't. So you can see there's some sunlight rays sort of being portrayed across the photo, which kind of makes for a bit of a distracting takeaway from the image that you're looking at. Now, you got 200 megapixels versus 108. Is that really going to make a huge amount of difference in the grand scheme of things? Not really. Yes, you can have more detail with 200, but 108, some would argue, myself included, that that's enough. But the 200 and the 50 as options together are really handy. So that, I guess, makes up for it and gives you more flexibility than what just the 108 or 12 option does with the Note 20 Ultra. Flicking it over into nighttime photography, nighttime photos are so much better with the S23 Ultra. I thought the Note 20 Ultra was good. I really did. But just being able to see the difference in the generations that I have, it's crazy the leap that Samsung has made. You can see the difference. The Note 20 Ultra, it brightened it, but it couldn't clean it up. Whereas the S23 Ultra brightened it and cleaned it up. And you can see how dark it was. It's done a stellar job at bringing out the detail in the grass and brightening it at the same time. Now onto video, there is a huge difference here. The Note 20 Ultra, Samsung really made a play to add in video capabilities. A lot of it was more software related and modes and things you could do, but not a lot of it was actually practical in real world usage. Its stabilization still wasn't great, and the 8K was terrible. So where the S23 Ultra wins here is the 8K streets ahead. You can see side by side here that one, the crop of the 8K in the S23 Ultra is wider, and that's because it's using that new sensor that's able to do it. And that frame rate, it's so jittery on the Note 20 Ultra, and the S23 Ultra is smooth. I couldn't believe it. The difference is amazing. The portrait mode with video has improved drastically. You've got 4K portrait capabilities versus just full HD, and the cutout's better. And this is actually portrait mode photos, but you can see the difference in one, the cutout being better, and two, the HDR. The HDR with the sun that was behind my head, the S23 Ultra was able to properly expose it and blur the background and do the cutout right. Whereas the Note 20 Ultra, it's not bad. It's a bit more washed out, and it wasn't able to get the HDR quite right. The thing I noticed the most though is the OIS. And this is just shooting 4K 30 frames per second, walking side by side. The difference with the S23 Ultra is amazing. Because it's got a wider correction angle with the main camera, you will honestly see this difference live, even as you're recording. But when you play it back, that is when you truly can see the improvement that Samsung has made. So if you're using a Note 20 Ultra now and you think you've got good videos, wait till you try the S23 Ultra. Switching to the selfie camera is just better. The 12 megapixel dual pixel, it's more detailed. It exposes everything correctly. Skin tones are better. The Note 20 Ultra was so flat and washed out. I couldn't believe that people would take selfies with that. And that's not being harsh. That's just showcasing you can see it. You can see it. The S23 Ultra does improve things both with portrait mode and just standard selfies. There's a huge tick for the S23 Ultra there. Other things with the camera, the Expert RAW app is better. There's more you can do with it. Whilst you do have the 3 lenses you can use with the Note 20 Ultra, you just can't access higher resolution, astrophotography, or the multiple exposures. Again, S23 Ultra just gives you more. So overall, if you've got a Note 20 Ultra right now and you're on the fence, you're thinking about whether or not you jump ahead to the S23 Ultra, stop thinking about it. And that's not me telling you to go buy a new phone. That's just saying that if you are already considering it and you're looking at the S23 Ultra, there's so many reasons to upgrade. The Note 20 Ultra does hold up in some areas. Like I said, if you stopped making smartphones 3 years ago, you'd happily be using a Note 20 Ultra today because you didn't know what you're missing out on. But the fact that the smartphone industry just moves at a pace that you can't stop, there is something better to go to, and the S23 Ultra is that phone. But that's it for this week. Thank you very much for tuning in. Let me know if you're here at the end. It'd be nice. But let me know as well if you are considering upgrading to the S23 Ultra, or if you already have, and tell me what your experience is like. Also, if you're on Twitter, come follow me there. Also on Instagram, come hang out with me there, and make sure you subscribe because I've got more coming. I'm not going away. Thank you very much. I'll chuck up some other videos that YouTube might think you might like to watch, and then I'll see you in the next one. You!